It is Thursday, January 2nd, 2025, and this is the Rich Lieberman Bay Area Media Pulse. Sometimes we talk more than just Bay Area media. We go national, we go sometimes even international, and uh, we discuss various items involving the media, the radio, television, internet, um, television news, radio news, satellite. We go all over the place. I want to talk today. This just irritates the hell out of me. Always has. Is do you ever notice the propensity of this Bay Area, the amount of time that we spend collectively on the weather, even when there is no weather? If you go to other parts of the country or the world, but let's stick to the country because that's my point, my emphaticness here. When there's legitimate weather, when there's hurricanes, when there's floods, big floods, when there's tornadoes, and there's lots of people tragically that are killed in said weather events. That's worthy of the kind of attention and media coverage that said weather events get. Yet here, whatever the case is, I don't know if it's a fetish, I don't know if it's some transplanted Easterners or Midwest people or people from the South who come here and maybe they miss the actual weather that they report on. We just talk about weather here when there's no weather. There's a headline in that high school publication called SF Gate, part of the San Francisco Chronicle, and they make a point of saying, well, we're not affiliated with the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Chronicle says, well, we're not affiliated with SFK. We're owned by Hearst, but we're very much competitive. Yeah, we'll get to that someday. But there's a headline that we're going to have one more day of rain tomorrow on Friday, and there's an extended amount of dryness, sunshine. Good. We could start talking about the drought again before we start talking about floods. And then we could talk about the snow in the Sierra and all that. It's kind of, there's like a conga line. And by the way, the SF Gate, which is a joke, unless you like red burritos and purple houses in the Mission, and the various the various restaurants are about to close, or a really nice topic newsy headline about an In-N-Out burger in the middle of the valley. But in any event, there's a headline up there that has to do with the extended amount of dryness that we're expected to see after Friday's rain, which will pretty much hit all of the Bay Area. A headline. And naturally, that headline will be copied by one of our illustrious television stations so they can talk about the fact that even though we've had a lot of rain and there's snow all over the place, Tahoe, Mammoth Lake, and all of the snow country, you got to be worried about a drought. Folks, we've been living in igloos the last couple of years. We've had records amounts, right? Look what the hell happened, which they've told us of 5 million times in the Pacific Ocean in Santa Cruz when most of the pier was washed up. We have a deluge of rain. We have more rain and snow that we've ever had for this amount of time for the last 3 years, going on 3 years now. We're not even at the edge of the beginning of winter. We just kind of started it. We're now, a week into winter. So we're going to have plenty of storms, probably, for late January and February and March, and probably a little bit in April. That's real weather. When weather happens legitimately, like flooding, like overwhelming floods or blizzards or snow events or when you have whatever. That's weather. That's when you report about the weather, not forecasting the fact that we're going to have an extended amount of time where it's going to be sunny outside like it is right now. And oh my God, we're going to have another drought. The only area that thrives on this kind of sensationalism is the Bay Area. When weather, which is a part of our little radio that we have, traffic and weather together. Even when there's no weather and even when there's no traffic. But again, that's another story. I have never seen the emphasis on illegitimate weather than this spot. LA doesn't give a shit about weather. You think LA talks about weather, whether they get it or not? They're always going to have water, courtesy of us. That's something that we can legitimately talk about. Nobody talks about the weather in New York unless there's a blizzard. And even then, they haven't even had much of a weather wintry mix at all for the last few years. But when you go to New York, they're not discussing the weather 24/7. They just kind of deal with it. Same thing in Vegas or I mentioned LA. Chicago hasn't had much weather. Those big storms and the wind events. That's why they call it the Windy City. Do you hear them talking about the weather in Chicago? No, only when there's weather. The Bay Area, it's a part of our culture, for God's sakes. People talk, oh my God, it's windy outside. Oh my God, let's go up to the Russian River. And while we're talking about the Russian River, we can go down 101 and stop by the hardware store in Marin, in San Rafael, where all they do is talk about the fact that there's weather events coming or the Russian River. How many goddamn times are we going to hear about the Russian River is about to flood? Even when it's not near flooding or anywhere near flooding. The truth of the matter is we've got some kind of a weather fetish. It could be sexual. I don't know. A guy could take a girl out to dinner. They could have like one of those romantic dinners. And, he's got the wine going. He's thinking about his footsteps after the dinner. And he's going to go back to the place and maybe to seduce his woman, assuming he likes women. Maybe he'll talk about rain. And maybe she'll become quite cuddly and start to take off her dress and, do the wokey hokey and to put all that stuff. The weather is something that is only discussed in gross in these parts. Hell, even up north, where tsunamis that are not really tsunamis, but are reported as such on a certain local San Francisco-based news station, the only news station where they have rotating anchors, whack-a-mole, and 50,000 goddamn traffic reporters. My point, folks, is this. When we have a said weather event, prolonged rain, actual flooding, something where there's a drought, a legitimate drought, where there's, 4 straight months where every day is over 100 degrees. Now, that's not going to happen here, but that's my point. The amount of time and money and coverage on something that is literally not taking place is beyond me. There, as I pointed out, go to New York. They have a nor'easter. But even at that, they don't really discuss it other than maybe a day. They talk about actual news. They talk about actual things that happen, like, God forbid, what took place the other night in New Orleans, which became not only a local story, but a national story. They didn't talk about the weather when there was no weather. Here, we have it in our social template. It's like a part of us, and shame on those assignment editors who have nothing better to do. Look, when there's a slow news day, when there's no news, be creative. For God's sakes, that's why they're paying you. Send a reporter to City Hall in San Francisco. Ask questions about the homeless encampments down near City Hall, or in Oakland, where it looks like shit near Lake Merritt. Why does it look like shit near Lake Merritt, which used to be the hallmark of Oakland, Lake Merritt? How beautiful it was. Imagine that, a lake in the middle of this urban oasis, which is now getting dirtier and dirtier by the day. Those are legitimate stories. Not talking about fucking rain when there's no rain, flooding when there is no flooding. And I don't give a shit if you go up to Napa and talk to the locals. Oh my God, the Napa River is at half flood state. Well, God, oh my God. Rich Lieberman almost got laid the other night. Is that news? Maybe for Rich, but not for everybody else, which is kind of like what we have delegated weather to. Even when, I repeat, there is no weather. This just in, breaking news, even to shitty news sites like SF Gate and various television news stations. Do you notice how many times, say on Cron, which I just bitched about, and KTVU, do you know how many? Just count one day when you're breaking wind or have nothing to do with yourselves. But seriously, count the number of times in the morning that Cron talks to the weather guy when there is no weather. They just do it. It's filler. I get that part too. They're lazy. They don't know what the fuck to do, even when they have halfway decent resources to do what I just suggested. Doesn't have to be City Hall. Go to the Tenderloin. Talk to people. Go up to a drug addict. Say, are you okay? Why are you shooting yourself? Is it that bad? Can you not go a couple blocks down the street and look for work? Or try to get work, try to get help. Simple things like that. Do a man on the street, for God's sakes. You know as hell how to send some fucking reporter to the hardware store in Marin when there's a heat wave. Oh my God. Imagine that, a heat wave in the Bay Area. When you send that reporter to the hardware store and say, boy, oh boy, looks like you don't have any fans left. What's happened? Or that lovely one I love. There's two. When it's 100 degrees and you send a reporter to Livermore and ask the roofers working up on roofs, hey, pretty hot up there. Or the Walnut Creek Fountain. Yeah, my favorite, my all-time favorite. The Columbo-ish kind of colossal combo. We're going to ask Walnut Creek people how hot it is and interview two people, maybe a white guy or an Asian woman or a black man or a gay person, little kids, because it's Walnut Creek, Happyville, the Cocoa version of Mayberry, and talk about the fact that it's hot outside. Nobody, even in Chicago, in the South, where it gets brutally hot, they don't go on and on and on and on about the weather. When it gets tornado-ish, when it gets so hurricane season and causes a lot of death and destruction and mayhem like Katrina, like that other one a couple of years ago, but not as bad as Katrina, when there is actual weather, of course, because it's news. That's legit. Here, we talk about a goddamn rainy day on Friday, followed by, I don't know, I guess the satellite says we're going to have an extended amount of time where it's sunny. Ooh, let's talk about the drought, even when there is no drought, because we have nothing better to do, because our assignment editors need to be re-educated have a reset, and oh my God, actually look and scan the wires like Bay City and look for news. Nah, we're too lazy, but we can. Talk about the weather, even when there is no weather. It is a joke. It's not just one entity either, it's across the board. Look how many people, the weather people that we have, 4 or 5 weather people on one station alone, because they can't report news. They're incompetent, they're incapable of reporting news. And KCBS, that joke of an outlet that is now beyond funny, sad, and beyond sad, totally incompetent. But guess what? We've got weather together, even when there is no weather. Oh my God, overexposure, incompetence, neglect. It's making me sick too, as you can see and hear. But folks, this is nothing new. This has just gotten to the extreme, beyond the extreme. And again, one of the reasons why you come here, because nobody else is going to talk about this pathetic state that we're in. It is a joke. It makes our media look even sicker and stupider and more idiotic than it already is. I hate to say that. There's no joy in saying that. I'm just stating the obvious. Get a grip, folks, on the fact that your local media is incompetent and cannot discuss actual news. Hell, let alone even report actual news, because we must talk about the weather, even when there's no weather, and even when we're predicting weather beyond the scope of when we don't have any actual weather to begin with. I'm talking in malaprops, but you get my point. Please, folks, do me a favor. Watch me. Tell your friends to subscribe. You subscribe and do make a contribution to my site. Therefore, I can give you everything you desire and look forward to seeing and hearing and information, entertainment. And guess what? No high pressure systems, just a lot of mellowness.